while a woman was cooking, she accidentally cut her finger, but the wound didn't heal instantly as it usually would. Her face turned pale, and her husband, with a serious expression, immediately sliced his palm with a small knife, only to find that his wound also wouldn't heal. Realizing the severity of the situation, the mayor, who was in town, urgently called a meeting with all the residents of the island. However, when the residents saw the wound on the mayor's hand, they were all terrified. After all, for the past 10 years, no one on the island had ever been sick. Even injuries would heal in the blink of an eye. This sudden change could be traced back to 10 years ago. At that time, town's Bobby discovered an overturned boat drifting onto the isolated island. From the boat, he could hear faint cries of a baby. Bobby immediately notified the residents to rescue the child. However, during the process of entering the boat's cabin, he was accidentally cut by a broken piece of wood across his abdomen. Despite the intense pain, he quickly rescued the baby and brought her back to shore. To everyone's shock, his abdominal wound healed instantly in front of everyone, as if it had never existed. At the time, Bobby's wife had just suffered a miscarriage, so they decided to adopt the miraculous baby. From that day on, the island's clinic closed its doors. Soon, the residents realized that as long as they were near Isla or came into contact with her, any injury or illness would instantly heal. Even Bobby's elderly mother-in-law, who had severe dementia, miraculously returned to normal and at the age of 70, went back to school to become a teacher. As a result, the residents of the island began to line up outside Bobby's house, and Isla grew up under this unique adoration. But Isla's abilities were far beyond just healing. People noticed that whenever she dipped her hand into the sea, the nearby fish would be drawn to her by an invisible force, swimming right up to her hand. Therefore, whenever Isla went out to sea, the residents would always return with an abundant catch, and the people on the island lived prosperous lives. In order to protect Isla's secret and ensure she could stay on the island forever, the residents unanimously decided to sever all contact with the outside world. Whenever a ship passed by, they would ring the alarm bell, signaling everyone to extinguish all lights so as not to attract attention. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye, and Isla's extraordinary abilities allowed the island's residents to live carefree lives. The couple, who had spent all those years with Isla, didn't show a single sign of aging, but they had no idea that Isla's power hid a much darker, more terrifying force. One day, while Isla was playing with her friends on the mountain, she noticed a beehive that had fallen to the ground. She reached out her hand, and to her surprise, the bees didn't attack her but instead clung to her hand as if they were well-behaved pets. Just as she was about to show off this amazing sight to her friends, she suddenly heard friends' panicked cry for help. Instinctively, Isla shut her eyes and clenched her fist. When she opened her eyes again, she was horrified to see that all the bees had fallen to the ground.
Don't tell anyone about this, okay? Junior, promise? Okay, I won't.
Lifeless, the cruel scene stunned both Isla and her friends. Due to Isla's healing powers and the island's isolation, the residents gradually developed alternative forms of entertainment. The adults became addicted to the thrill and excitement of indiscriminate combat, since no matter how serious the injury, they would instantly heal once near Isla. Even the children began playing a dare game swallowing a poisonous fruit, which would cause the poison to take effect in 15 minutes, and they had to reach Isla's house within that time. In the past, they always managed to escape death, but this time, something went horribly wrong. With winter approaching, Isla was unexpectedly taken out to sea to stock up on fish, even though she usually only went out once a month. So when they learned about this, although they immediately found a doctor and the doctor quickly helped the poisoned boy by clearing his stomach, it was too late, he was already dead. When Bobby heard the news, he immediately took Isla to the clinic. However, in front of all the expectant onlookers, no miracle happened. After all, Isla's power could only heal, not bring the dead back to life. In the aftermath, a strong sense of helplessness overwhelmed Isla, and she became despondent. She felt incredibly guilty, believing that it was her fault that the boy had died. At that moment, she didn't realize that her emotional shift would lead to a catastrophic disaster. That night, Bobby's wife was the first to notice something was wrong. Isla's powers seemed to have mysteriously disappeared, as her injured finger didn't heal instantly. Shocked, Bobby immediately cut his own palm to verify, and the same thing happened to him. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he quickly gathered all the residents of the island and informed them of the dreadful news. To give his daughter enough time to heal emotionally, Bobby decided to stop the daily visits from the islanders. However, This decision met with strong opposition. The residents argued that even if Isla had lost her abilities, they should continue their regular visits, as this had become an essential part of Isla's life. If they suddenly changed things or showed too much concern, it would only frighten her further. Bobby insisted that as her father, he had the right to decide her life. But what he didn't know was that, over the past 10 years, the islanders had grown so accustomed to living free of illness and injury that they had begun to see Isla as nothing more than a tool for longevity and a shared possession of everyone. As the argument escalated, Bobby's mother-in-law, Faye, who was also Isla's grandmother, suddenly spoke up. But unexpectedly, she didn't support her granddaughter. Instead, she completely ignored Bobby's position and proposed holding a vote on the matter. As expected, the result was predictable. Aside from a few who truly cared for Isla, the majority of the residents only cared about their own interests. So by the next day, a long line had formed outside Isla's house once again. Meanwhile, the parents of the boy who had died from poisoning came to Bobby, since their daughter had become despondent after her brother's death. And now that Isla had lost her healing powers, they asked Bobby if they could leave the island and move to the city to help their daughter recover. Although they promised not to reveal anything about Isla to anyone, for Isla's safety, Bobby refused without hesitation. He had come to see Isla as his own daughter, and he knew that if outsiders discovered her abilities, she would be forcibly taken away for research. As time passed, Isla's powers never returned, and Faye's dementia showed signs of returning. In a state of anxiety and fear, she, along with others on the island who had suffered from illness, formed a support group, hoping to find comfort by listening and sharing their feelings. But one day, the island's doctor suddenly barged in. He was one of the few people, besides Bobby, who genuinely cared about Isla. Originally, he had only been curious, but after hearing the members of the support group avoid facing reality and, in their extreme frustration, blaming all their problems on Isla, the doctor became furious. He immediately began chastising everyone for their cowardice and selfishness. They did not hesitate to throw the doctor out. Utterly disappointed, the doctor felt fear spreading inside him. So that night, he went to the home of the boy who had died, telling the parents that he too wanted to leave with them, since Bobby was his close friend. The doctor said he could help them sneak a boat out, but what shocked him was that, in order to escape, the family had already secretly built a small boat using all the usable parts from their house. However, just as their plans were silently underway, things took a dramatic turn. That evening, Bobby's wife, as usual, came to Isla's room to tuck her in. In passing, she noticed something amazing. Her finger, which had been injured, was starting to slowly heal. She called out to her husband, and they didn't realize that Isla's abilities had not disappeared, but would only become active after a period of dormancy, until they saw the scar on her husband's hand quickly disappear. In her excitement, Bobby's wife wanted to take Faye to Isla for healing, but Bobby, being the more rational one, stopped her. He knew that if Faye regained her mental clarity, the entire support group would find out, and once again, the islanders would see their daughter as a tool. Who could accept people standing beside their bed every night, watching them sleep? So he urged his wife to think about their daughter. After all, life's cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death was the natural order. She agreed. However, when she saw her mother's obvious frailty, she couldn't bring herself to resist and decided to bring Faye to Isla's room. Afterward, she returned to normal. As expected, the next day, the fisherman went straight to Bobby, insisting that he take Isla out to sea to fish. Faye even handed Bobby a bottle of sleeping pills, claiming Isla needed to be sedated so their plan could succeed. At that moment, the ugliness of human nature was fully revealed. What made Bobby even more heartbroken was that his wife, too, was gently urging him to agree. Feeling cold and disillusioned, Bobby began to entertain the thought of leaving the island, but his wife strongly opposed it. In the end, with no choice left, he agreed to their demands. He watched helplessly as his unaware daughter drank water mixed with sleeping pills and, in a numb haze, carried her toward the sea, waiting for the wishes of the residents to come true. In the end, the pile of doubts faded, and smiles returned to everyone's faces. But this seemingly beautiful moment made Bobby shiver, and the thought of escaping the island became even more certain. The doctor also realized something was wrong. After learning the whole story, he was furious as well. However, both he and Bobby were powerless to change the cruel reality, because once they chose to isolate themselves from the world, order and rules no longer belonged to morality or law. Upon learning Bobby's intentions to leave, the doctor secretly informed him about the plan with the parents of the dead boy, but neither of them noticed that Faye had been watching them. That night, when the doctor returned home, he found that Faye had been waiting for him. She questioned him about what he had said to Bobby earlier. Upon hearing that the doctor had thoughts of leaving, she earnestly explained that everything they did was for the sake of the island. But as soon as he left, the doctor felt a sharp pain and collapsed on the ground, convulsing violently. In the blink of an eye, he was dead. Inside the broken bottle he had knocked over, there were several red plant fruits. Next, in the crazed eyes of everyone in the Mutual Aid Society, a merciless fire burned it all to the ground. Meanwhile, Bobby, still unaware of these events, was carrying Isla to the dead boy's parents' house. When they saw the fire, fearing exposure, the parents chose to leave early. By the time Bobby arrived, all he saw was their receding figures. The next day, a speedboat headed directly toward the island. The fisherman immediately rang the alarm bell, and Bobby, as the town mayor, hurried to greet them. The visitors were a female police officer and a child welfare worker. The parents who had escaped had finally reported Isla's situation, but they only mentioned that Isla was in danger, without revealing her special abilities. Under their strong insistence, Bobby reluctantly agreed to take them to his house. Upon hearing the news, the islanders silently followed their steps. At the same time, while everyone was at the dock, the doctor's son, Junior, sneaked onto the speedboat. Using the walkie-talkie, he contacted the dispatch center, requesting immediate backup. When he saw the forms about Isla's case, he realized the problem and quickly grabbed a hunting rifle. Rushing toward Isla's house, the workers reached Isla's room, but during their conversation, Isla showed no signs of abnormality. After all, the islanders only used her abilities and had never shown any malice toward her on the surface. They were all extremely kind. However, just as the workers were about to leave,
You're supposed to thank me when you leave the room.
Pardon me?
You're supposed to say many thanks to Isla.
Isla said something that made the worker uneasy. After the interview, the worker decided, for safety's sake, to take Isla and her parents back to the city for further investigation, but this decision instantly sparked fierce opposition from the residents. Without hesitation, they blocked the path, and one person even pulled out a gun at the female officer. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, Bobby rushed forward to mediate. In the chaos, Bobby was accidentally injured, and the female officer was shot dead by the residents. Faye and the others quickly helped Bobby back to the room, but they didn't rush to bring him to Isla. Instead, they forced him to promise that he would never leave the island, and only then would they help him get treated. Faced with the threat of death, Bobby reluctantly agreed. After obtaining the answer they wanted, Faye brought a glass of water mixed with sleeping pills to Isla's room. In the urgency of the situation, they had no time to explain and forced Isla to drink the water, but Isla had no idea what was happening. Just as she struggled, Junior burst in with the hunting rifle and angrily demanded to know why Bobby's wife was doing this. He then quickly pointed the rifle at Faye, knowing that his father's death was somehow related to her. After the fear subsided, Isla opened her eyes again. Just like the fallen bees, everyone in the room had lost their life. But this time, it wasn't just in the room. The extreme terror triggered Isla's power, and in the blink of an eye, everyone on the island lost their life. Looking at the hellish scene in front of her, Isla could only mumble, "I'm sorry." In a daze, she walked to the beach, staring out at the vast ocean in sorrow, and the story abruptly ended, just before the rescue team arrived.